Ministries of education, political leaders, and the education community are pledging urgent support for foundational learning. The first step is to measure the current state of learning and begin to track our progress. Collecting data is the best way to see where we are and where we can go. But right now, we don't have enough data. Sustainable Development Goal number 4, the goal dedicated to education, calls for measuring the quality of learning in primary and lower secondary education. However, we just do not have enough quality data. This means we are missing great opportunities. With more data, we can track progress, identify needs, and learn from one another. Countries can make more informed decisions about their own education systems. Now, understanding how and what to measure is easier than ever before. The UNESCO Institute for Statistics and its partners have teamed up to create a tool for ministries of education and country-level decision makers. The Learning Data Toolkit is an online portal designed to navigate the options for assessing student performance according to the SDG indicators. Explore it and find out about the different assessment methods available to each country. Learn more about how your current national assessments fit into the equation, or about international and regional assessments you may want to join. There is also clear information on new ways of understanding student performance, like the Global Proficiency Framework that provides expert advice on how to measure what matters. We invite you to visit an exclusive preview of the toolkit at learningdatatoolkit.org. Find out more about assessing learning accurately and reaping the benefits of understanding student performance across countries and over time. More accurate, reliable, comparable data will give us all a critical edge in realizing our shared vision of ensuring an inclusive and equitable quality education for every child. Join the effort to measure what matters.
Thank you to our valued partners. Ladies and gentlemen, under your happy clapping, please. Ladies and gentlemen, as our several honorable ministers said earlier, we can no longer talk of education without, in the same breath, mentioning COVID-19 and its impact on the education system of every single country of the world. The next speaker will deliver a keynote address on the topic of COVID and the need for our continent to build forward better, more resilient educational systems. We are pleased to welcome on stage Her Excellency Professor Mariatou Kone, le ministre de l'Éducation nationale et de l'alphabétisation Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci. Bonjour à tous. Mesdames et messieurs les ministres en charge du secteur de l'éducation-formation, mesdames et messieurs les représentants des partenaires techniques et financiers, monsieur le secrétaire général de l'ADEA, mesdames et messieurs les représentants des ONG, mesdames et messieurs les professionnels de l'éducation de tous les continents présents ici ce matin, chers partenaires de la triennale 2022 de l'ADEA, mesdames et messieurs, croyez-moi, je suis très heureuse de me retrouver ici, à Maurice, avec toute la délégation de la Côte d'Ivoire, composée du ministère de l'Éducation nationale et de l'alphabétisation, du ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la recherche scientifique et du ministère de l'Enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et des apprentissages. Nous sommes heureux de nous retrouver parmi le parterre d'experts que vous êtes pour partager l'expérience de la Côte d'Ivoire dans le domaine pour partager l'expérience de la Côte d'Ivoire dans le domaine de la quête d'un apprentissage fondamental de qualité et repartir d'ici enrichi de l'expérience des autres. Mesdames et messieurs, à l'instar de nombreux pays, notre pays, la Côte d'Ivoire, n'échappe pas à la double crise de Covid-19 et de la crise de l'apprentissage. Les évaluations nationales et internationales du PASEC ont montré un faible niveau d'apprentissage des élèves. Dans le même temps, les enseignants, eux, selon le même rapport, semblaient maîtriser leurs compétences académiques. Cette situation incommodante interpelle les acteurs du système éducatif et amène à s'interroger sur ce qui se passe réellement dans la salle de classe. C'est pourquoi, avec l'appui des partenaires au développement, plusieurs initiatives ont été prises pour adresser cette problématique. En effet, des politiques nationales visant à améliorer les apprentissages, les premiers apprentissages surtout, ont été expérimentées au moyen de projets pilotes qui se sont avérés concluants. Ces projets pilotes se sont appuyés sur des recherches reconnues dans le domaine de l'acquisition de la lecture, de l'écriture et des mathématiques. Comme exemple, il y a le projet d'amélioration de la prestation des services éducatifs, le PAPSE en abrégé, qui est en cours de mise en œuvre en Côte d'Ivoire grâce à l'appui du Partenariat mondial pour l'éducation. Et c'est un projet qui a développé, entre autres, un ensemble de programmes pour améliorer les résultats de l'apprentissage de la lecture, de l'écriture et des mathématiques pour le préscolaire, le cours préparatoire première année, le cours préparatoire deuxième année et le cours élémentaire première année. Un programme pluriannuel de formation avec la mise en œuvre d'une formation des encadreurs pédagogiques et d'une formation des formateurs, une technologie numérique pour collecter et analyser les données d'observation de classe, un renforcement de la chaîne de production et de distribution des manuels scolaires à travers le système de pré-location que nous appelons Bonamas. Je pourrais citer également l'exemple de l'initiative ELAN de l'IFEF, ELAN étant École et langue nationale pour l'expérimentation de l'enseignement bilingue, langue nationale français. En Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons expérimenté 10 langues. Je pourrais citer également en termes d'efforts de redressement, le programme d'enseignement ciblé PEC et l'initiative francophone pour la formation à distance des maîtres IFADEM qui ont développé des approches pour la remédiation scolaire et la formation à distance de milliers d'enseignants. Mesdames et messieurs, aujourd'hui en Côte d'Ivoire, en comparaison à 2019, pour faire référence au rapport PASEC, les évaluations montrent une modification des pratiques pédagogiques des enseignants en mathématiques, en lecture et en écriture, et une amélioration des conditions matérielles des apprentissages. Hier, au cours d'une session parallèle, nous avons vu avec Tarl que la Côte d'Ivoire est passée de 17% d'apprentissage en 2019 pour les mathématiques à 23% en 2021. Ces efforts sont à la fois confirmés par des données d'enquête et des données d'observation de classe. Vous comprenez donc l'importance de mesures de l'évaluation qui aident à travers un suivi-évaluation à prendre des décisions d'amélioration. Par exemple, dans le domaine du suivi et de l'encadrement des enseignants, on peut citer, pour ce qui concerne uniquement l'enseignement préscolaire et primaire, la réalisation de 17 865 visites de classe réalisées au préscolaire et au primaire, l'organisation de plusieurs 5 907 ateliers de formation au primaire ayant touché 59 070 enseignants, la formation de 1 800 instituteurs adjoints admissibles au certificat d'aptitude professionnelle, la formation de 7 089 directeurs des études, directeurs des écoles, éducateurs et enseignants des établissements privés, etc., etc. Mesdames et messieurs, dans le cadre de l'opérationnalisation des conclusions des États généraux de l'éducation nationale et de l'alphabétisation que le gouvernement ivoirien a autorisé en Côte d'Ivoire avec l'accompagnement de l'UNESCO et de plusieurs partenaires. Nous avons pris l'option avec les collaborateurs du ministère de l'Éducation nationale et de l'alphabétisation de consolider et de renforcer les acquis des efforts que je viens d'énumérer pour un impact à grande échelle. À cet égard, et de façon concrète, mon département, avec l'appui des différents partenaires, a entrepris plusieurs actions, à savoir la finalisation de la stratégie nationale des premiers apprentissages, la mise en œuvre du programme national d'amélioration des premiers apprentissages, le développement de la stratégie nationale de formation continue des enseignants, le renforcement de notre dispositif d'évaluation des apprentissages, y compris notre participation aux évaluations internationales mondialement connues. Par exemple, pour la stratégie nationale des premiers apprentissages, il convient d'indiquer qu'elle était devenue une exigence face à la multiplicité des initiatives, y compris des initiatives d'ONG, de philanthropes et du secteur privé. Son déploiement permettra de fédérer toutes les initiatives en cours à l'effet d'adresser plus efficacement la problématique de l'amélioration des apprentissages en lecture, en écriture et en calcul en Côte d'Ivoire. Pour me résumer, je pourrais dire que les initiatives mises en œuvre en 2021-2022 pour rattraper la perte d'apprentissage en Côte d'Ivoire se résument en ceci: tirant des leçons de la perte d'apprentissage consécutive à la COVID-19 et conscient des enjeux de la transformation de l'éducation, le ministère de l'Éducation nationale et de l'alphabétisation est résolument engagé dans une dynamique d'innovation qui s'articule autour de 4 composantes qui sont mise en œuvre de pratiques pédagogiques innovantes, production de ressources pédagogiques numériques, élaboration de documents de cadrage et de stratégies de réforme du collège, renforcement du suivi et encadrement pédagogique des enseignants. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est ce que nous faisons et nous envisageons pour la Côte d'Ivoire. Pour conclure, je voudrais profiter de cette tribune pour lancer un appel en ma qualité de membre du comité directeur de haut niveau de l'ODD 4 sur la transformation de l'éducation. Il est important pour l'Afrique de revoir, de réviser en tout cas la stratégie continentale de l'éducation pour l'Afrique dans le cadre de l'agenda 2063. Nous devons créer des synergies avec les initiatives existantes, profiter des opportunités et capitaliser les acquis pour un système éducatif résilient dans notre continent. Je voudrais dire merci à l'ADEA qui nous donne ici l'occasion à Maurice d'échanger sur les bonnes pratiques, les expertises et les partenariats. Je vous remercie infiniment de votre aimable attention.
Merci beaucoup, honorable Madame la Ministre, professeure Maïetou Kone, pour ce discours et aussi d'avoir partagé l'expérience ivoirienne. Distingués participants, l'ADEA et le rapport mondial de suivi sur l'éducation ont travaillé ensemble pour mettre en lumière le progrès réalisé par les pays et les problèmes critiques liés à l'éducation. Après un travail assidu de mise en place du rapport, l'équipe va maintenant lancer officiellement Born to Learn, le premier rapport de la série Spotlight sur l'achèvement de l'éducation de base et l'apprentissage fondamental en Afrique. Nous avons le plaisir d'inviter sur scène M. Albert Sengiumva, l'exécutif secrétaire de l'ADEA. Merci.
Thank you, Helen. Let me quickly, I know time is really not on our side. Let me invite Honorable Dr. Valentine Ouamaria, Minister of Education of Rwanda, to come on stage. Let me invite the Deputy Minister of Ghana, John Ford. Can you join us? And let me invite dear Josephine Kienje, the project manager of the Spotlight. Last but not least, let me invite the representative of the African Union as the other partner, Mr. Adumtai. Can you join us here? So let me say hello again. I did it this morning. It is with great pleasure and pride that I'm standing here to launch the Spotlight reports this morning. It's already afternoon, alongside my colleagues that are here present and ministers present. The birth of the Spotlight report has involved intensive work in the past years with first 5 countries, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Mozambique, Rwanda, and Senegal. I thank them all for their participation, their willingness and dedication that brought to the series, which is evident by the quality and honesty in the reports published today. I also wish to thank our other co-partner, the African Union. I'm extremely pleased to know that the findings we are highlighting through this series can be of benefit to countries across the continent as they feed into the new Land Policy Dialogue network launched yesterday on basic education. The new research will also, of course, be a critical input into ADEA's Policy Dialogue Forum. The Spotlight series is a unique arrangement. It bridges the global monitoring expertise of the GEM report with the national level experiences, faced daily by countries. It is an exciting new knowledge product for us all in primary education, completion, and foundational learning. And this is only the beginning. A 3-part series. We are delighted to be working with Angola as the next step, Mauritania, Niger, South Africa, Uganda, and Zambia next year, when more positive policies will be brought to light that we can share back with you all here today. More countries will join for sure. We are going batch by batch, so happy to engage with as many countries as possible. So with no further ado, I will hand over to my colleague and especially Honorable Minister Valentine Uwamaria, Minister of Education, Rwanda, one of our first Spotlight countries, who can actually take you through these experiences and lessons Rwanda drew from our partnership this year. Thank you, and Honorable. Yeah, you can sit. Or you can come, whatever you feel. Yeah.
I think we are all teachers, and teachers always stand. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here and participate in the ADEA 2022 Triennial to discuss how to build resilience and sustain the development of skills for the continent and even beyond. The Executive Secretary, Mr. Bear, just called me to share the experience, but I think yesterday those who were here had the opportunity to discuss in details about this research that was conducted. But I just want to say that building foundational literacy and numeracy skills for our children is the starting point. Reading and doing basic mathematics are the building blocks for our broader goals. Rwanda has made great strides and reforms over the last 2 decades, And these reforms have led to many successes, especially in access to education for all. But more remains to be done to realize the required education quality. The government of Rwanda has recently made unprecedented investment in education, including the massive construction of classrooms to ease people overcrowding and reduce long distances to schools. And the big part of this achievement was even done during the COVID time, where the country constructed more than 22,000 classrooms, new classrooms, which is equals to the number of classrooms that were constructed for the last 10 years. The recent investment also includes the large-scale recruitment of additional teachers. You may understand having more classrooms means having more teachers, and we've recruited more than 40% of the existing teachers that were there before the pandemic. And the work keeps going on because the more we have new classrooms, the more we have teachers. But having new teachers means also we have to build their capacity. So many partners are involved in building the capacity among the teachers, including the English proficiency as the language of instruction in the country, as well as ICT in education. Building the skills in ICT for teachers is also a priority for the government of Rwanda. So the increased availability of teaching and learning materials as well is highly needed. You may understand having new teachers, having new classrooms, it requires also a good package of learning materials to be available to facilitate the learning, the teaching and learning activities. We are also happy to announce that just this year, not even, it was last August, the government took a decision to increase teachers' salary, and the increases were between 40 and 88%, depending on the level of the teachers. And this also was done for head teachers and deputy head teachers, because we realized that improving the quality means also improving the teachers' welfare. And teachers' salary was on top of different CPD courses teachers are taking. Increasing their welfare was also important to increase the quality of education. I'm delighted to see the Spotlight Rwanda report completed and launched today at this time when the Ministry of Education and partners are working on elaborating an evidence-based national strategy on foundation learning. The findings and the recommendations of the Spotlight will add significant value to this strategy. It is also my hope that the report's findings, the challenges, good practices, examples of innovation can contribute to peer learning across the continent through the LEARN network that was launched yesterday by the African Union. As the Spotlight series expands across countries, together we can make foundation learning and universal basic education completion a reality. Let me conclude by thanking ADEA for welcoming us here this week to discuss such a vital topic. Thank you so much, Excellencies.
Thank you, Minister Dr. Maria Valentine. Indeed, we are talking about quality, but we know the welfare of teachers matter as well. It's so important to invest in teacher welfare and in order even for the constructions of schools to get really a good sense in terms of improving the quality. Thank you for intervention. Let me also invite now the Deputy Minister of Ghana, my dear friend Fojo. You can take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellency Vice Prime Minister and Minister for Education, Tertiary Education, Science and Technology of Mauritius, the Executive Secretary of ADEA, Albert, my good friend, Excellencies and Honorable Ministers of Education, excuse me, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it gives me great pleasure to be here at the launching of the Spotlight Report as one of the first countries to have taken part in the Spotlight Report series with UNESCO's GEM report and ADEA. The report was written on Ghana as a result of this partnership, and that provides comprehensive, candid, and invaluable insights into our education system. Naturally, it's not a very comfortable situation for one to open doors for such critical scrutiny, because you might be surprised to have the spotlight being set on some of the aspects of your education that might not best represent you. But although there may be some reluctance to share spotlights on areas where we can do better, when the children's future is at stake, dear friends, it is necessary and it is imperative. On this premise, we in Ghana were excited to open our doors to UNESCO's GEM report, and we did so without hesitation. The report has helped us build the evidence base by bringing data and contextually relevant research to guide and inform our progress toward a fulfilling, thorough education for all learners. It represents a unique opportunity to transform our education system and to learn new solutions, particularly at the foundational learning levels. Helping every single child to learn is ambitious, but it is entirely possible and actionable. Over the last decade, Ghana has made great strides in advancement of our education system. We have transformed our secondary enrollment ratio all the way to 95% now since 2017 with the introduction of the free senior high school and TVET education, which jumped enrollment from 800,000 students to 1.3 million students in just a year. Between 2017 and now, we've had some 2.2 million young learners, particularly from hard-to-reach areas, having benefited from this policy. Excellencies, children are born to learn, and learning to obtain skills that will make them themselves agents for the transformation of our countries and ultimately our continent, and the kind of skills that will be able to surmount the current giant and complex challenges that face us definitely cannot be in the rote learning system, whereas a learner is required to just reproduce verbatim what the teacher has told them. This must call for reforms. This must call for transformation in every aspect of our education, particularly starting from curriculum development. We at Ministry of Education, Ghana, have transformed our curriculum from the primary to secondary and many aspects of our education, having moved from the objective-based curriculum to the standard-based curriculum at the primary level and the implementation of the Common Core at the junior high, all to ensure that the learner is imbibed in them the critical skills that is required in our 21st century that will meet up the challenge of the fourth industrial revolution, the fundamental skills of critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving and communication are the dictates of the new standard-based curriculum we've been implementing. This way, our reform covers the school structure, the new teacher standards for teachers, and the new standard-based curriculum. And we did not forget that teachers are the agents of this transformation that we seek, and also need to understand what is expected of them. The Spotlight Report highlights ways that different countries among us are developing quality and teacher quality, and the importance of providing structured reports to both teachers and to school leaders. This is a journey that we have already started on. over the last few years, alongside providing guidelines to teachers, we have also started weekly professional learning community sessions in schools in which teachers meet to discuss teaching approaches. They get a chance for open exchanges on ways to strengthen their pedagogical practices and implement more successfully the curriculum in the classroom. And the research shows that these communities are working together to enhance teacher practices. We are already seeing some great results. For us at the Ministry of Education, the success of this program is not surprising at all. And for all stakeholders, as a student, a teacher, a minister, the president, it is noble to speak openly about challenges facing our education systems and to listen to the experiences others can bring to the table, all in our efforts to drive the collective transformation of education agenda on our continent. Children are born to learn, and so do I humbly implore that we keep learning from each other too, in order to put in place the conducive learning environments and competitive education for all of our children. African countries will have just such an opportunity with the Learning Education Analysis for Results Network LEARN, which was launched yesterday by the African Union with the Spotlight Report partners. On this note, I thank most sincerely ADEA for the opportunity to discuss the critical theme with you all this week. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister John. I was trying to translate, there's a say in our language that I have had time to try and translate it, that is basically say, if you want to heal an illness, you must first accept it. So basically, I think the Minister, you're pointing one of the critical issues that may come out tomorrow again, this issue of data. Hiding data does not help to improve anything. And this is a serious issue that we are having. So we need to get the data, the accurate data, to inform any change that we want to see in our educational system. And I'm sure my dear Ovi will get back to this during her session. Thank you. So let me invite the African Union representative, Mr. Adumta. He's heading the Pan-African Institute for Education Development, to say a few words. Adumta.
Merci Albert. Honorables ministres, distingués invités, permettez-moi d'abord de vous présenter les salutations de votre serviteur, le professeur Mohamed Belochim, le commissaire en charge de l'éducation, sciences et technologies. Vous conviendrez avec moi que l'Union africaine est heureuse de contribuer à cet événement autour du thème crucial sur le fondement même de l'éducation. Je saisis cette opportunité pour remercier JMR et ADEA pour avoir organisé cette triennale sur cette thématique qui revêt une importance capitale pour la Commission de l'Union africaine. Les uns et les autres l'ont déjà dit, que tous les enfants qui sont nés doivent apprendre. Et cet apprentissage s'étend jusqu'au niveau des États, au niveau des adultes que nous sommes. Malheureusement, ce n'est pas ce qui se fait le plus souvent. Le rapport que nous avons lancé hier, que la Commission a lancé hier, vient au point nommé pour nous interpeller sur la nécessité de tirer profit, d'apprendre des uns des autres. Les conclusions de ce rapport, Spotlight, constituent une contribution à l'atteinte de l'objectif de l'Union africaine et des États membres. Cet apport est en même temps un outil très important pour les États membres de l'Union africaine à double titre. Premièrement, ce rapport est un élément très important qui nous incite à la solidarité entre les États une solidarité qui nous pousse à progresser ensemble. Le deuxième élément le plus important que nous devrons tirer ici, c'est de comment aligner nos politiques, nos stratégies vers l'amélioration des apprentissages. L'Union africaine prend l'engagement de faire avancer cet agenda et nous avons hâte de poursuivre les discussions avec les uns et les autres. Et comme vous le savez, il est très probable que l'année prochaine soit dédiée à le thème de l'Union africaine, le thème de l'année prochaine soit dédié à l'éducation. Et je voudrais que nous puissions tous ensemble saisir cette opportunité pour que le mécanisme d'apprentissage soit véritablement un élément très important dans le cadre de la thématique que les chefs d'État et de gouvernement vont discuter l'année prochaine. Merci bien.
Thank you, Adumta. So it's now time to launch the report, and I don't see anyone else that could do it better than Madam Josephine. Josephine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you, honorable ministers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're really excited to be here to launch the Spotlight Report, Born to Learn. On behalf of our director, Manos Antoninos, I'd like to thank ADEA for the partnership. I'd like to thank the African Union, and of course, the Ministries of Education in the focus countries, and the various stakeholders who inputted and worked and provided case studies to inform this Spotlight Report. So the reason we're all here today is because there is this talk, and we've heard over and over how there is a present learning crisis. In reality, this discourse for Africa is not exactly correct. In our report, we find that the low learning levels we see in Africa today have in fact been present for generations. Commitments have been made, declarations have been signed, institutions have been built, but even then, learning levels remain low. The promise that we've made to our children has been broken. And this is why it's extremely important to shine a spotlight on foundational literacy and numeracy in Africa. We do so because it's important to know where we're going. It's also important to appreciate that much has been learned in the last 10, 12 years on this issue, and it also offers us the opportunity to learn from each other. With this edition of the Spotlight Report, 5 country reports were undertaken, and as well various case studies from 7 countries across Africa, and they inputted into the Continental Report. All the reports will be available today. Next slide, please. So I just want to, in the next couple of slides, share with you some key findings from the report, and some key messages. If you look at this slide, you'll see in the green is the level of students that achieve minimum proficiency. The purple is the students that complete primary education on time and achieve learning. As you'll see, the top of the graph is the world, and unfortunately, the bottom of the graph is the context for learning for African children today. And this is why we must urgently address the issue and also use the opportunity to learn from each other. What we find through the Spotlight Report is that African children they're 5 times less likely to achieve basic skills than children elsewhere. And that's simply unacceptable. What the report offers us, since we know that there are They are interventions that have been tried and interventions that have been tried at scale. It offers us some lessons of good practice. I'd like to share a few of those here with you today to sort of encourage everybody to address these issues. What we put forward is that in order to achieve learning, there should be in place minimum conditions. In Africa, one of the key challenges is that 1 in 3 children receive school meals. Yet we know that having a school meal is important for attendance, and it's also important for learning. A good practice that comes from Rwanda is that the government is committed to providing a school meal to children in primary school and secondary school, and they finance this up to 40%. Next slide, please. Another challenge, when we talk about learning, another challenge is that 3 children have to share 1 textbook in Africa. So the idea that after all these years of investment, after all these years of working towards this goal, there isn't 1 textbook per child, then you'll understand why learning outcomes are low. And yet we know that children who have textbooks have a 20% chance higher of learning to read. In Benin, what they've done is they've established decodable textbooks, and they've also been able to address this issue of cost. Today in Benin, these decodable textbooks cost $1 per textbook, and that's pretty good. Next. Thanks. As well, because of our diversity, there's also a challenge. Just 1 in 5 children are taught in their home language. But again, there's lessons to be derived. In Mozambique, with their bilingual education program, it has led to success. Up to 15% of improved learning outcomes for those children in the bilingual education versus those children in the monolingual system. So that's something that has been tried to a great scale in Mozambique that can also be replicated elsewhere. Next slide, please. Now, there's such a huge expectation on teachers to deliver learning in the classroom, but so often teachers are not supported. What we find is that there is so much evidence. The evidence points from 8 countries at scale, success in training teachers, success in offering them structured support, success with providing them with teacher guides so that they focus their instruction on improving learning. This evidence is supported at a wide scale in 8 countries, so we're certain that it can be tried and replicated in different contexts. As well, you heard from the Honorable Minister of Ghana that peer learning in Ghana is working to help teachers improve their pedagogical practices. And just like with anything else, good leadership matters, right? So I'm stronger because I have a good leader, Manas, who helps me focus on the result of things. So in the classroom for teachers, they need good, strong school leadership to help them stay focused on improving learning. So those are some of the tools and the approaches that have shown to be successful for strengthening teachers who are a key ingredient for ensuring learning for our African children. Next slide, please. Now, my favorite, having grown up in Kenya, my favorite African proverb is, "A roaring lion kills no game." It's not enough to scream this from the rooftop. It's not enough for me to stand here and speak to a room full of educationists and honorable ministers. We cannot just talk about this. We have to act on it. Results will only come from our actions. And a key first step that countries are taking, including countries like Ghana and Rwanda, is by really articulating a strong vision for learning, by prioritizing it, by setting goals for learning, and by measuring outcomes to ensure that learning is happening in the classroom. In Ghana, the Gallup project is working through a framework by which they've also added national assessments at grade 2 and grade 4. Now, this is really, an important and a commendable achievement. Congratulations, Ghana. Because at present, what we find in the Spotlight report is that there's no data on learning for 2/3 of the children in Africa. That is surprising. And frankly, how are you going to plan without having learning data for 2/3 of your children? And where we also find that learning assessments have actually increased in Africa. So there's more learning assessments that are being carried out in Africa, but those learning assessments are then not being used to inform policy or to inform the practice of teaching or the curriculum, right? So we encourage you here, particularly the donors who are financing many of these assessments, to really make them available. Don't just sit on them, make them available to the countries. Next slide, please. Our report, it's actually not ours now, it's yours, it's ours. Our collective report, Born to Learn, is not just about learning for children. It's also about learning. I don't want to hear my voice twice. It's also about learning for all of us. Now, we started with the focus countries in Ghana, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Senegal, and Mozambique for the first Spotlight cohort countries. For the next cohort, we've invited Angola, Mauritania, Niger, South Africa, Uganda, and Zambia to join. We believe strongly that bringing countries together so they can learn how others are addressing the learning challenges will really help us move forward to understanding what works and putting it into practice so that we can achieve results in foundational learning. We're really pleased with and welcome the peer learning mechanism, Learn, that was launched yesterday by the African Union. Thank you very much. Please, that you can download the report. I believe you have a QR code on your tables or outside that you can access. And do join us. Don't just download it, please read it. And then also join us online with the hashtag Born to Learn. We'll close the event now with a video from our champions and as well some information on the campaign that we're rolling out with the launch of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you so much. There's a video coming out? Okay, great. Thank you.
All children are born to have an education, but not everyone gets the chance. I had to fight for mine. My education lifted me up to where I am today.
Children of today are the leaders of tomorrow. Therefore, they need to learn and be equipped with the skills and competencies of tomorrow's world.
All children deserve the chance to learn literacy and numerical skills in primary school. Still today, 1 in 4 children on our continent do not complete primary school. Only 2 in 10 children read well enough to carry on learning. This is a critical foundation to continue the journey through education and develop more advanced skills. But if children need to learn, governments do too. This is why the Spotlight report is so important. It provides valuable insights on the latest approaches, helping improve foundational learning across Africa.
I am therefore honored to participate in this Spotlight report, lifting up the message that all children are born to learn, and it is our duty as adults and leaders in government to ensure that they are given that opportunity to learn.
Join me to build on Africa's potential because all children are born to learn.
Born to learn.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you. I've just been reminded that it did not come quickly out of the presentation, but I'm sure in the reports, the issue of feeding, the school feeding program, that has a really great impact, on the quality of education, especially for these children. And I know in Rwanda, they had a great program on this, I'm sure in other countries, including Zambia. So this is something we need to take into consideration as well. Maybe it did not come out in your presentation, but it's so important as well. Thank you so much. Can you clap again for the ministers in here? Thank you, Josephine, for nine. Back to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Albert Sengiyumva, honorable ministers and representative of the CHAM report. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence the high-level ministerial and CEOs roundtable discussions, the two of them, panel 1 and panel 2, on the lessons learned in policy and practice from the COVID-19 pandemic and building resilience to sustain Africa's educational system. After those two panels, I think we would have deserved that we take a break, and then we will have lunch after the two sessions. Therefore, distinguished participants, we would like to invite on stage the moderator of this plenary session, Dr. Obiageli Obi Ezekwesili, President of Human Capital Africa and Senior Economic Advisor at the Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative. Dr. Obi will be moderating the first panel on foundational learning. Over to you, Dr. Obi.
Ladies and gentlemen, the day is fast spent, and we really have to make this business happen quickly so that you can reclaim the time already lost. So instead of 1 hour, we're going to be having a panel of 45 minutes. So you better pray for me, because I'm going to need that prayer to keep my panelists, very distinguished people, within the time that we have. So the first panelist to come up and take a seat is my dear friend and sister, the Minister of Malawi, Honorable Agnes Makonda Ridley. Please clap. It's right next here. And Minister Mariotu Kone, who had given a speech earlier, Minister of Côte d'Ivoire. Please, Madame le Ministre, we need you to come up. Please clap. And she'll be followed by another dear sister, the minister from Gambia. Yeah, there you go. You look so beautiful. I was looking for you. Please sit right next to your sister. And then we'll be joined by dear friends that work within the education, the global education space, especially supporting the work that we do on our continent. Let me get Dr. Benjamin Piper, who is the Global Education Program Director for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Please clap. And of course, our dear friend Dr. Margarita Focus Licht of the Global Partnership for Education. She is the Acting Deputy chief executive of that important program on education. Please. So, very distinguished audience, we had cracked a joke earlier today that Nigeria has given a contribution to global discourse by saying we stand on all existing protocols. You know, that's a contribution, very major, because it saves me the hassles of having to read through the very distinguished profiles of the people on this panel. And the conversation that we're having this afternoon is on the foundational learning, especially as regards what happened as a result of the great pandemic. And today's topic, what was the impact of COVID on foundational learning across the continent, and how did countries deal with it as a means of ensuring that we can have resilient systems of education across our continent. So I'll quickly just go through with our ministers. It's historical and it's important to know, but I'd want it to be very short and snappy. So, so that way we can then look toward the future. Resilience is about the capacity to prepare for risks and for opportunities so that they don't take us by surprise ever again. So the past is to say, Madam Minister, what was the impact of COVID on foundational learning in your country? What steps did you, as a decision maker, have to take to immediately respond to the crisis that was basically changing children, most of whom were already changed before COVID? I'll start with you, Agnes.
Thank you very much. For Malawi, COVID, as we've heard earlier today, COVID basically exposed the huge weaknesses of the education system, such that the first order of business for me as minister was to see, are our schools ready to do that which we were asking them? And what we were asking them was, we deployed a standard operating procedure for how to prevent COVID spread and how to look after children and teachers that may be infected. And the first thing we discovered is that for years and years, we'd run schools without water. There were schools without water. Yes, it might look strange, but we had been asking teachers and other school leaders to produce quality education when there was no sanitary facilities in the schools, no safe water. That was, well, it shouldn't have been a big shock, but so COVID was good in that it exposed that. Then we also realized that we had to strengthen our links with the Ministry of Health because COVID was bringing an immediacy to the threat of life that we needed to make sure that schools were ready to deal with threats. And when you look at schools in Malawi, the very rural ones, the nearest health facility may be 50 kilometers away or more. And so we had to make sure that we work on that. We also had to make sure that we look at the state of teachers, because the teachers were themselves afraid. Teachers felt that they were besieged because they were being asked to be present in school regardless, when other workers could choose to work from home. Teachers couldn't choose to work from home. We didn't have the capacity to deliver teaching through e-learning or through the radio, and so we had to work with that and see what to do about teachers. We had a lot of other things to do, but I think to begin with, I will say that it exposed the weakness of the system.
I love the fact that you said it exposed, because those weaknesses were there.
Were there.
And so it took that kind of a pandemic to expose them to the policymaker. Yes. We would prefer that data that we track annually, quarterly, biannually, would expose these weaknesses to us better. And that takes me to the next question on, so there was catch-up that needed to be done. I'm staying with you, Agnes.
Okay.
There was catch-up to be done so that the children who were not learning even before COVID, now for that change could catch up. And then there was the whole thing about the system is exposed for the cracks. What then has your thinking been? Have you been one of those just trying to, just get up and keep going? Or are you rethinking things now?
So for Malawi, we've decided to rethink our education for a number of reasons. COVID is just one of them, but we also suffer a lot of climate change disasters. This year alone, we've suffered 2 cyclones that have destroyed a lot of school infrastructure out of the infrastructure that we already do not have. So to look at what do, we looked at our data that shows that in primary education, we managed 90% net enrollment, but only 52% of those complete primary school. So we have 10% never at school, and then only 52 completing out of the 90%. And then we have at secondary school only 15% net enrollment, which means 85% of our young people are not in school. University entrance, I think it's even worse because we have less than 1%. So with that kind of data, when I sit here and say, for Malawi, we have decided that by 2063, we are going to be an inclusively wealthy, upper middle income country that is self-reliant. How are we going to do it? First, we want mindset change. The very mindset change that will enable us to believe that it is possible to start with that kind of statistics. When COVID came, it actually made the statistics I've given you worse, because after the 6 months of closure of our schools, we lost around 400,000 learners, 40,000 of whom were girls who had either become pregnant or gotten married. So we had a job to do. How do we fix a system where, first of all, we didn't have enough classrooms? How do we fix a system where, secondly, we did not have a strong digital platform to offer alternative ways of learning and teaching? We believe that our entry point is looking again at foundational skills, which if we fix, we believe that it will have an impact on repetition, it will have an impact on dropouts, and an impact on girls staying in school, an impact in bringing the 10% that are not in school, an impact in making sure all of them complete school. So
that's a really good place to land it, because, when a disaster of the scale that we experienced has happened, the worst thing that can happen is to just wake up and continue walking around like most of the people I saw at the airports on my way to Mauritius. The whole world has left home, and we're all just roaming the world as though nothing happened. And there's something good about that. But there is also something not so good about it, because the kind of reflection that is necessary for systems that have gone through the level of exposure that we've seen, for the number of children that are in school but not learning on our continent. When you said to me that you had to rethink and remember that the foundation is really where it should start. And this remediation by looking at foundational literacy and numeracy is what they constituted this panel for. Madam Minister, when you spoke, you talked quite well about the issues in education and the approaches to fixing things. Could you tell me, what 2 things did you immediately do with the school system, the primary school system? Because we're focused on foundational literacy and numeracy. What 2 things did you immediately do as soon as children and their teachers were back in the classroom?
Merci. Merci, Madame. Je voudrais dire que lorsque Covid est survenu en Côte d'Ivoire, les écoles ont été fermées 2 mois, du 16 mars au 17 mai 2020. Donc 2 mois de fermeture afin de limiter la propagation de la pandémie à coronavirus qui a affecté environ 7 millions d'élèves en Côte d'Ivoire, de tous les ordres et degrés d'enseignement, et cela a posé un défi majeur de la continuité des apprentissages. Nous avons élaboré une stratégie déclinée en 3 phases majeures la prise de mesures sanitaires, des actions administratives et puis des actions pédagogiques. Mais je pense que par rapport à la question que vous posez ici, nous avons essentiellement été guidés par 5 principes. Le premier principe, c'est celui de la continuité éducative, qui s'exprime par l'exigence de ne pas interrompre l'action éducative, mais en même temps, tenir compte des situations d'urgence que sont les conflits, les épidémies, les catastrophes, etc. Alors, l'une des caractéristiques de notre service public, c'était donc la continuité. Le deuxième principe de notre dispositif d'enseignement a été la gratuité. L'accès aux ressources pédagogiques diffusées par les médias partenaires ou hébergés dans les plateformes numériques était entièrement gratuit pour tous les élèves et leurs parents. Le troisième principe a été celui de l'inclusion, c'est-à-dire que le dispositif qui a été mis en place visait les élèves du primaire, du secondaire général, de l'enseignement technique et professionnel, du public et du privé.
I may not speak, but I do understand. That's why I was... but to please the conference people, I will put it on.
Merci. Le quatrième principe, je vous ai dit qu'il y avait 5 principes, je vais rapidement rappeler. La continuité éducative, la gratuité, l'inclusion. Et le quatrième principe, c'était celui de l'équité, qui affirme que tous les élèves et tous les bénéficiaires du dispositif de continuité éducative et des apprentissages doivent avoir les mêmes chances d'accès, d'exposition, d'exploitation et d'appropriation des contenus d'enseignement. Et enfin, le 5e et dernier principe que nous avons appliqué, c'était la pérennité du dispositif. Il faut souligner que la crise sanitaire de Covid a mis en exergue des défis à relever qui sont, entre autres, le développement de l'accès à l'Internet et aux terminaux en milieu scolaire, ainsi que l'implémentation du télétravail et la pérennisation du téléenseignement comme complément de l'enseignement présentiel. Voici, en gros, les principes que nous avons appliqués juste avec la survenue de Covid. Et c'est au vu de tout cela que nous avons, pour la Côte d'Ivoire, fait un saut, nous avons osé, nous avons pris le risque de penser à faire des états généraux de l'éducation nationale et de l'alphabétisation pour repenser notre éducation, pouvoir regarder dans le rétroviseur avec Covid, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons améliorer, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons conserver, et ça a donné un rapport qui nous permet aujourd'hui de faire des réformes aussi bien au niveau de l'apprentissage fondamental que dans le secondaire.
D'accord. Let me ask, if you were to judge between the lessons of resuming school and hearing that even before COVID, we had as much as 8 children who would go through primary school before the age of 10, they are not achieving literacy and numeracy in the continent of Africa. And then you wake up, it's after COVID, and the schools have resumed. I heard all the things you read from the notes, but I'm just sort of asking, what in the classroom are you doing differently with the teachers in the school system to change this data? Is there anything that we have learned as a result of the data that's coming out on this learning literacy, learning poverty that we're coping with on the continent? Yes.
Je vous remercie. Je crois que tout à l'heure, j'avais exposé sur les pratiques que nous estimons innovantes avec la mise en œuvre d'un programme d'enseignement ciblé, qui est un programme de remédiation qui s'adresse essentiellement à des élèves qui sont en difficulté, donner la chance à tout le monde, faire en sorte que tous les élèves puissent bénéficier du même type de formation, de la même formation, avec les mêmes éléments pédagogiques. J'ai parlé également de la mise en œuvre du programme PAPCE, qui est un programme d'installation des premiers apprentissages en français et en mathématiques. Je crois également avoir exposé sur un programme que nous appelons Programme national d'amélioration des apprentissages. Et en plus de tout cela, il y avait tout ce qui est production de ressources pédagogiques numériques qui nous ont aidés avec des fiches de leçons produites et embarquées sur la plateforme. Le téléenseignement, en tout cas, a été la première des choses que nous avons faites. Et c'est la leçon que nous avons comprise, c'est qu'il y avait plusieurs initiatives, justement dans le domaine de l'apprentissage fondamental, et que nous devions faire en sorte de fédérer toutes ces initiatives en élaborant une stratégie nationale des apprentissages.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, why I was prodding is that we often have found this desire to do something in education. It's never lacking. You see people, they say, education is in crisis, we have to get it right. But then we've spent so much energies on not the things that can address the critical challenges that we have in our education sector. And so when we have this kind of convening by ADEA and Albert and his team and colleagues from all the other organizations are wanting us to shape a direction for the future, it is a place where we cannot be diplomatically correct, right? Because that's not what the children want. So it does help that we're very precise in identifying what we may have been doing that will not address the core problem, and the things we need to do that will help us get higher learning outcomes for the children. And that's why I'm so excited that the women who are seated here today, all ministers of education, are people who understand the benefit of having learned at the foundational level. It created the basis of the achievements that we have seen at the individual level. And so when I turn to you, Ben, I am saying, if you were made the Minister of Education of the 54 countries in Africa, and you just entered office today, what would be the 3 things that you would immediately do? Because you want those numbers to change by the next time we are in Uganda. Where is the Minister of... Yes, you invited us to Uganda.
Kampala.
Before we go to Uganda, Minister of Education, 54 countries in Africa, what would you be doing?
So the one thing I would say is, after having worked with ministers for the last 15 years, I would say this job is too difficult. Being minister of one country, from what I've seen, is too difficult. And let one of the ladies here...
So please clap for our ministers of education.
Yeah, I answered this question with a lot of humility, because anything I know of, I've learned from this continent, and educationists on this continent. And actually, that's the first point, actually, is that if you remember the figures that were just shown on the gaps between outcomes in numeracy and literacy in Africa compared to the rest of the world, we don't need a small improvement. We need a fundamental shift in learning. And I think what's most encouraging, my first point, is that there are programs and countries on this continent that have made substantial learning outcomes improvements and have done so at scale, Dr. Obi. That's really important. It's not a small... I'm a researcher, so I love setting up small-scale studies. If you give me time, that's what I would do my whole life, is a small-scale study here and there. But what we need are large-scale interventions that have not made small improvements, but have made large improvements. So let me give you a few that you might not know that are important for you to know. There's a program in Senegal, Lecture Port 2, that doubled learning outcomes. Yes, clap for Senegal. There's a program in Kenya, Kenya Tusome, that doubled learning outcomes. There's a program in Liberia, Read Liberia, very recent results that doubled learning outcomes. The fundamental thing we need to do to reduce that gap between Africa and the rest of the world is look to programs that have done it already and see what they've done. And think about this, the sort of approaches they've done. So that's number one, is look elsewhere in sub-Saharan Africa to improve outcomes. Number two, some of the lessons from those studies realize that all that matters, this is a controversial point, so I'll say it where everyone can see me. All that matters is the teaching practices of the regular teacher in a rural classroom. That's all that matters. We have two...
Can you repeat that again? Because it sounds too simple. And therefore, there is always a tendency to struggle with things that sound simple.
Yes.
And they would like you to be a professor.
Yes.
So is there a way to say it so that these educationists will understand what you're saying?
Again, professor job is too difficult for me too, so let me try and do what I can. All that matters is the teaching practices of the typical teacher in a rural classroom. That's all that matters. And so if we're going to double learning outcomes, we need to think about the programs and the materials that those rural teachers would do. And as much as I love many of the policies we've talked about today, the ones that will reduce these gaps are the programs that focus on teaching improvement. Teachers want to teach better. They just don't need to. Madam Minister, I heard you say earlier, I remember this quote very, very clearly. She said, "Is the art of teaching was the old way. We need to think about the science of teaching." And I think if we are focused on the rural teacher, there is a science of teaching. There are a certain number of things that can help them teach. Lesson plans. The previous presenter talked about these lesson plans, 8-country study that showed lesson plans make a difference. Training that's focused on helping them with skills. I heard the deputy minister in Ghana talk about the teacher learning circles at the circuit level. I think that's the Ghana system. The circuit level where they are talking to each other. Coaching systems that work. All of those things working together to help the typical rural teacher to teach better on a daily basis. If we want to improve, that's what needs to happen.
Number three,
I can still talk? I thought that would be all I can say.
Number three, quickly.
Number three is to say, if you focus on learning lessons from elsewhere in Africa, if we focus on teachers and the rural teacher, number three, our continent needs better data. Better data. What's exciting, you saw the video from UIS earlier today. There are new, just released toolkits that would allow countries to do two things at once, Dr. Obi. Number one, to have data for policy dialogue. Madam Minister, what matters most is to have the data you can have the conversation in your own country. That matters most. But secondly, you can have data that would be able to have Malawi and Gambia and Cote d'Ivoire compare with each other. So there are data tools that exist now from UIS that would allow every country in sub-Saharan Africa to have a country-specific data solution that allow both the country dialogue as well as the international dialogue, the regional dialogue that matters most. So number three is to think about what's the solution for my country that would allow me to do both. Talk internally about what to improve, and secondly, talk externally so we have some idea of where we stand in comparison.
Please clap for the notional Minister of Education of 54 countries. The reason that I asked him that question and I said to him that perhaps that number two recommendation sounded too simple for very distinguished academics in this room is because I know him to frame this as structured pedagogy. So for some of you that are really wanting something that would impress the president, when as a minister you're saying to them, there are just certain things we have to do differently in order to increase the learning outcomes. I wanted him to use his famous language so that you as a professor presenting to people in cabinet what has to change. You know our continent loves to hear big grammar. Huh? So if you say to them now that, we just have to get the teachers to teach in a different kind of way based on the science of teaching to enable the children learn, they would say, that is so simple. So why haven't you been doing it? And yet you know that there are many reasons why that has not been being done. And so when I turn to you, Margarita, what are the reasons that you have seen around the continent? You've been at GPE and things around education for so long. Why is it in 2022 in Mauritius that we're learning that one of the simplest ways to actually begin to fundamentally improve learning outcomes is the way we teach? The teaching effect on outcomes is so deep. But we build fancy classrooms. We even want to condition some of the classrooms. We think that, more money is what we really need for education. Once we have more money, we'll have solved the problem in education. Why is it taking us this long to get to where Ben just pointed out?
That's a very good question.
You have the answer.
It's a very good question, and listening to a lot of really good things have already been said. I think, we've been too focused on doing everything at once.
Thank you.
And we have developed very fancy, expansive education sector plans that develop every single aspect of that needs to be covered in an education system. And we've sort of thought that we were going to implement all those things and somehow achieve the change. I think that what we really need to do is prioritize, and in a way that's very context-focused.
Can you hold on for a minute? Audience, can you speak after me? All we need to do is to prioritize. Guys, you have to repeat this because that's part of what we're going home with. All we need to do is to prioritize.
All right, well, it's maybe a little bit more than that.
Go ahead.
We need to really focus in each context, and contexts matter. In each and every context, diagnose and assess. What are the bottlenecks? What are the critical points that are blocking the fact that all children are learning? And what's behind those points? Mm-hmm. And what is it in each context that has the most potential to start delivering change?
Excellent.
And that needs to be context-based. If you set yourself in a country a goal to, for example, if you identify that pressure point is early grade reading and math, for example, then if you start focusing on that objective and saying what we're going to achieve now is to step ahead in early grade reading and numeracy, then you can work from that and really taking a system approach and saying what are the things that have to work seamlessly together in order to achieve that outcome. So
I hear you, Margarita. Assuming a minister is sitting here and thinking, there was a time when they told us that we just needed comprehensive education plans. And now they are telling us we should just take one thing and do. Would they be right to think that the confusion in what comes out for recommendations in education is also part of the problem?
Absolutely. And I think that's why this has to really be a dialogue at country level. And if you ask what it's going to take to make that kind of a step forward, you have to look at the interactions between, for example, teacher training and teacher remuneration and teachers' working conditions and curriculum. And not just the curriculum, but what it seeks to deliver and what the goals are through the curriculum. And you need to look at everything, even how the distribution chain of materials to school level, and all of those things are interlinked. And that's what the shift is. I think looking at it as this is our plan and these are all the things we're going to do is not the same as looking at this is the goal we want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And for that to happen, all of these elements and all these stakeholders have to work seamlessly together. And we're not sort of subdividing into, but can I say something about the importance also, for us as international partners, to align and coordinate behind the priorities that these wonderful ministers are setting. Our job is not to come with new priorities for you and tell you what you need to do. Our job is to support you in your priorities. And I think that there's a little bit of why things haven't worked is also about what we're delivering and how we're working. So
thank you.
I think we share very much in the responsibility.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to applaud the words of Margarita. You know, she said something very important, that partners should line up behind the priorities of the countries on our continent, that you as leaders are the main burden bearers. There's an African proverb that says, a person who is standing by the roadside and there's a heavy load next to them, and they're just standing and just watching the heavy load, people will pass by and pass on. But when the person behaves as though they want to lift the load, those who are passing by will join them to come lift the load. That is to say that if any minister of education on our continent looks at all the data we have been seeing since we started this conference, and it did not in any way make them feel uncomfortable, it would be unfair for any other person to be feeling uncomfortable on your behalf. I mean, why should they feel uncomfortable on our behalf? This is our business. This is what should keep us awake. Madam Minister of Education of Gambia, when you listened to Ben and you listened to Margarita, tell me, what is running on your mind? As you get ready to get back to Gambia, you're saying to yourself, foundational literacy and numeracy, we have to crack this thing. We can make some quantum leaps in our learning outcomes with these children. What can I just see your schedule for the next 1 week? Share with us. What's your schedule looking like?
Thank you very much, Dr. Obi. Quite honestly, when you presented data yesterday on foundational learning, and it showed that in my country, the Gambia, about 95% of the children were not learning. Yeah. I can't describe how I felt. In fact, it's like at one point, I did not understand what percentages were. Oh, wow. I was thinking it was too much for all that we think we have been doing. And we have not moved, it seemed. And today, the other data that was presented about the whole world and where sub-Saharan Africa is, I honestly felt, look, can I go home quickly and start fixing my house?
Yeah, clap if you want to, because that's the fierce sense of urgency that is necessary. But the second thing would be, I urgently want to go home.
Oh, yes.
But the things I choose to do when I get home can determine whether those outcomes improve or not. So the Ben gave us some ideas. Margarita gave us some ideas.
Absolutely.
So your schedule looks like what?
They're very good ideas. And you said something about African proverbs. And we also have a proverb that we also use in the Gambia, that if you want to have a clean bath and you want somebody to help scrub your back for you, because your hand definitely cannot reach that far, you must be scrubbing your own stomach. And then somebody will come and help and do your back. Yeah? That is, it's like that's what Margarita has just said, that we must lead the way. We must take the first step. We must let them know what we want them to help us with. And coming back to Ben, he talked about making sure that the teachers, or we put in place the right methodologies and practices. And for a long time, somebody talked about teaching all the children at the same time. We cannot teach the whole class at the same time and we expect results, learning outcomes from all of them. They are different individually. So they all have different learning paces. So we must take note of that. I have said to teachers, yes, we teach the whole class, and then chalk and talk, that's the old method. We must be ready to adapt new methods of teaching, new methodologies, new practices. And here we are talking now about child-centered methodologies are what we must use. Teachers have been using talk and talk, the whole method. They start the old method. They stand in front of the board, they teach the class, and they ask the children, do you understand? And all of them would say, yes, when more than half of them do not understand. And we think we have taught. We have not really helped the children to learn. We must be able to look at their individual needs. As a teacher, we should be able to assess the individual needs. And when we do that, then we are able to have the right methods. We may be able to think of the right methods to help every child in our classes to learn. Okay. It is important to get every child to learn, rather than asking, do you understand? And they all say yes, when that's not true.
Excellent. Listen, I have somebody in this audience who has experience of going into the classroom, changing an approach to teaching, and suddenly children are actually making progress. Asia, I want you to spend 2 minutes to share and expand on what Ben said about the teaching. The teaching. We have to improve. Yes, I need a microphone to her. Because she walked into a Malawi classroom and experimented on this. Let's hear from you.
Okay, off the top of my head, I'm Asia Kazmi. I'm with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but I'm a teacher of mathematics. And the things that we have to think about, and it's building on the point the minister just made, is where are our children now? Assess them. Where do they need to be? That's your curriculum goals. And how are we going to get them there? And we need to support teachers in a way that makes their lives easier, in a way that it makes them take up these new practices. We can't just demand, like we don't expect them to demand of children, we can't demand of teachers just taking up these practices without providing them support. Practical support, demoing and working with them and planning with them in their classrooms. Things that they can use tomorrow in their classroom, coaching them and supporting them. Teaching should not be a unique sport. It should be a contact sport that they were learning with other teachers. But I think going back to very simply asking that question across all levels of the system, from the classroom up to international, but very importantly at the district level, at the national level, that question is, are our children learning what they were supposed to learn this week? And if they're not, what do we do about it? And remediating constantly. And this could be very simple. See me after classroom, have an extra lesson, but not leaving millions and millions of our children not learning by the end of primary school.
Thank you very much. Please acknowledge Isia's contribution. You know, it's very easy. Yes, I know we are up for time, but I'm going to take them as the concluding thoughts. It's very easy for us to sit here, and there could be people who are saying, but this is too simple. Why are we reducing a complex problem to improving the quality of teaching? And that once we improved the quality of teaching, that children would have higher learning outcomes. Is there anybody who is struggling with that? Is anyone in this hall struggling with the idea that if we improve the quality of teaching, children's learning outcomes would dramatically begin to improve? Anyone? Nobody wants to struggle with it. You're very smart. I tell you why you're very smart. Because some other people would say, how can you say it's only about improving the quality of teaching? We need this and we need that. You haven't touched on this. You haven't talked about the road that leads to the school. You haven't talked about, and they would build so many castles. We are in a restrained, constrained environment. And we're simply saying to achieve scale and to get the degree of leap in learning outcomes, we just have to be scientifically inclined to put in our weight behind the most important set of things that need to happen. Madam Minister of Education of Malawi, you now have a sense where you're saying there is a scorecard that gives me a sense of direction on how to improve these learning outcomes. Can you focus on this specific issue of the learning outcomes?
Thank you so much. For Malawi, with the background that I gave, we need to be improving from, we happen to be, I think, the first country that's adopted a scorecard that Human Capital Africa, my sister Obi here, has developed. It's a scorecard that enables the monitoring and evaluation of whatever programs you put in place, but most of all, it's a scorecard that gives you a baseline. Where are you starting from? So I know we have low enrollments, especially in secondary, for example, and we have not achieved 100% enrollment in primary, but what actually happens in the classroom when the kids are in class? The scorecard gave us, we put us at, I think it's 53%. So some things are happening, obviously, but we have a long way to go to get to 100%. And for Malawi, what we've decided is we've articulated a vision that says, yes, what happens when teacher meets learner is the most important thing. But that covers a lot of things, because what does it mean when we say enable the teacher to improve the teaching practice, especially in the rural areas? Well, it means, for example, having effective teacher deployment policies. So in Malawi, we've decided that for our foundational skills to happen in real, we need to put our best teachers in the first 4 grades of primary school.
Clap now. You're just listening to a minister who is already gone beyond worrying about the problem to doing some specific things. Clap.
So to underscore the importance of that for us is that we do not have phase training for our teachers. So we do not have specialist teachers for early grades. What it then means is that we have to look at their training and particularly prioritize that group of teachers and support them in a particular way, because they will now carry the job of building Malawi's education. The whole of it will be on their shoulders. Next, we're saying, what will our teachers be teaching? We need to revisit the curriculum and see that the curriculum both responds to the fact that so far our children have not been learning, and also the fact that we adopted that long-term development plan that I said at the beginning that we want to be inclusively with. So then we also want to say overall teaching of, producing of our teachers, pre-service and in-service teaching. How are we going to do it to respond to what we now know, the kind of teacher that we need, the quality of teacher we need? Then we're also saying, hang on, yes, the teacher is very important. What the teacher does is very important. But what about the state of health of our children? When our children, and thank you for saying context specific, a lot of our children are malnourished. We also have high levels of hearing impairment, visual impairments. How are we going to make sure that every child sits in front of that teacher who has been enabled and supported, and they are actually capturing what the teacher is saying? So from there, we're going to say, how are we going to do it, since we don't have enough teaching learning materials?
She really is the one that should be the Minister of Education for all the countries.
So the story continues, and we'll share more in the next iteration. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Minister, I want you to just 1 minute, because we need to be leaving. So 1 minute to sort of say, I have heard a lot of things from my colleagues. There are lessons that I'm taking away. And when I get home, I'm just going to do it.
Ben, je vous remercie. Je crois qu'en plus des leçons qui ont été apprises ici, pour ce qui est de la Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons 4 priorités. La première priorité, c'est d'améliorer l'apprentissage fondamental, la pertinence des programmes et la qualité de l'enseignement. Ça reprend un peu ce que disait ma collègue.
Excellent.
La deuxième des priorités, c'est de réformer la profession enseignante avec tout un paquet également d'activités à mener. La troisième priorité, c'est d'élargir et d'encadrer l'offre d'éducation non formelle. Et puis la quatrième et dernière priorité, c'est de développer le numérique pour améliorer la gouvernance, la résilience, pour une offre équitable et inclusive. Vous aurez compris que tout cela nécessite bien sûr une démarche qui intègre l'individu, l'élève, l'enseignant, les lieux d'apprentissage, l'environnement socio-culturel immédiat. Et bon, c'est une approche de co-construction qui intègre le suivi, l'évaluation, la mesure, la redevabilité, la reddition, le financement.
Okay. Madame Ministre.
Et je voudrais m'arrêter là pour dire que toutes ces stratégies dont on a parlé ici ne sauraient être mises en œuvre sans l'apport, l'accompagnement des partenaires. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. You know, what I would really want to do is that great program in Senegal, your neighbor, I'd like Awa. Where is Awa? Awa, the minister is available. She's going to take some ideas because that peer learning, country to country, is so important. There's so much that Côte d'Ivoire can teach the sub-region. We look to you. I'm Nigerian. We look to you for a number of things. You look to us for some of the things. You can look to Senegal. Senegal can look to you. So I do believe that some of these scaled programs that we have identified, that as you're going home, Awa is going to arrive in Abidjan and see how we can share some of these ideas so that we are really solving things. Madam Minister, you have the word to say, I am going home to implement. That's what we want to hear.
Yes, Doctor. I am going home to implement.
Good, sister. Ben.
I've got my notes. I've learned lessons from my colleagues.
Yes.
And there are things others are doing that we are not doing in the Gambia. And of course, obviously, if I had the opportunity to share my Gambia experience, I'm sure some of my colleagues would learn some new things.
Excellent.
We've all learned something, and it's good that we all go back home and try to see how we fill in the gaps. Thank you.
Excellent. Margarita, GPE, you said to them, we're very good friends. We will support you as you carry the load.
We are going to continue to put GPE's funding behind evidence-based priorities that will deliver learning outcomes.
Thank you so much. Ben, those are your 3 points again for the road. Quickly.
I won't say the 3 points, but I will say that I look forward to being able to amplify and connect other countries that are doing great work to improve foundational learning. The solutions are in this room. It's whether or not we can implement them at scale inside of government systems and then learn from each other using these peer mechanisms. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my wonderful panelists, applaud for all that we have learned in the course of this conversation. I think if there's anything that Albert can take joy from, it is that we have leaders of education on our continent that are not being defensive about the problems. They are essentially taking ownership of the state of affairs. And these leaders are saying, show me the evidence of what works most, and we will implement. There's no better place to end this session than where we are right now. Thank you very much, everyone. God bless you.
pardon.